Coming up on Arirang News, the health authorities in South Korea decide to extend the current social distancing measures by another 2 weeks as new COVID-19 cases stay in the 1700s. There'll also be stricter rules on gatherings, even of family members. Trade is roaring back for South Korea. A current account surplus posted in June for the 14th month in a row. Compared to a year earlier, it rose by the most in 5 years. And at the Olympics tonight, the South Korean women take on Brazil in volleyball. A win would get them into the gold medal match. In climbing, Korea's Park Hee-jun is going for, in karate, is going for a bronze. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's current account surplus in the first half of this year increased by the largest amount in 5 years, led by solid exports of automobiles and semiconductors. Pan-ji reports.
South Korea posted a current account surplus for the 14th straight month in June, led by strong auto and chip exports. The Bank of Korea said on Friday that the country recorded a current account surplus of $8.85 billion in June, up more than 23% on year. Exports of automobiles and auto parts in June increased almost 75% on year, and semiconductors more than 33%. Services saw a smaller deficit compared to the same month of last year, as the transport account recorded a surplus with the recovery of the global economy. Through June's figures, the surplus for the first half of this year amounted to $44.3 billion. This is 133% higher than in the same period last year, when South Korea suffered a drop in outbound shipments amid the pandemic. It is also the largest increase in 5 years, as outbound shipments to major countries including the US, EU, China, and Southeast Asian countries all went up.
As vaccination campaign speeds up in major countries, most of the products showed strong export performance in most regions.
In the first half of 2021, automobile and auto parts exports rose almost 48% on year, and semiconductors more than 21%. Pan-ji, Arirang News.
Korea Shipbuilding and Offshore Engineering has won an order worth more than $500 million to build an offshore oil production facility. It'll be built by the company's main affiliate, Hyundai Heavy Industries, and it's a semi-submersible floating production system. The order is from an American company, and it'll be built off the coast of Louisiana by late 2024, with construction to start in the second half of next year. This is the third order for an offshore facility won by KSOE this year. South Korean internet-only lender Kakaobank made its debut on the stock market this morning, and by the end of the session, it had become the country's biggest retail lender by market value. Shares of Kakaobank opened at around $47, already up about 40% from its IPO price. There's been criticism that it's far overvalued, being relatively new and having no brick-and-mortar stores, but the stock's price again surged by almost 30%, which is the maximum for the day, to close at around $60. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street closed higher overnight. Earnings still strong, but we're waiting on the jobs report due out Friday morning, and we can talk about that in just a minute. But the S&P in particular at a new all-time high, though. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, Dow Jones went up by 0.78% and broke the 35,000 level again. And S&P 500 hit the 4,429, rising by 0.6%. And also, NASDAQ is near the all-time high, rising by 0.78%, close to 15,000 level. And even the small and mid-cap stocks were up by 1.72%. Clearly, quite significant recovery from the previous session sell-off as investors continue to monitor a strong earnings seasons. So far, there have been about 340 companies out of 500 have reported the earnings, and the record high level of 87.6% have bit the profit estimations, and the level of the additional profit that they're showing is historical high. So clearly the earnings are showing a very significant growth, and therefore markets are continuing to be showing a rising trend. Furthermore, the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits fell to a second straight week to 385,000 in the week of July 31st. This is pretty much broadly in line with the market expectation of 384,000. So it's confirming that the labor market is progressing its recovery. So with this, overall, the economy seems to be fairly stable. Earnings are record high level, and we think that the U.S. market rising trend should further continue.
Well, back to that U.S. jobs report for July, coming around at 8:30 Friday morning Eastern Standard Time. Estimates are all over the place, ranging from an increase of around 350,000 all the way up to more than 1 million. What are you looking for in terms of U.S. employment?
Right. Friday's job report seems to be a wild card, while the various economists' estimations are all over the map. Now, the estimation is saying that the economy added about 840,000 jobs in July, about the same as June job growth, according to the economist poll by the Dow Jones. Economists mostly expect strong growth for the next couple of months, but the Delta variant of COVID-19 has become a wild card for the both labor market and economic growth recovery. Still, the uncertainty shows up in a wide range of forecasts for the job July. It varies from anywhere between 350,000 to 1.2 million. Obviously, we have to wait and see how that plays out. But in overall cases, we do think that the labor market recovery is not going to be full scale with the fourth industrial revolution that's happening in the market, with the COVID-19 affecting somewhat, given the fact that the home working is actually continued to be very strong. And the current changes that we are seeing in the labor market is definitely here to stay rather than change. If you look at the occupancy ratio of the office space of New York, it's still at only 30% or less. So clearly there's been a change in terms of how people are working. So staying at home and doing working is changing to such a rapid pace that we think that the overall the labor market is changing in terms of its structure.
Right, and then here in Korea today, both the Kospi and the KOSDAQ were a little weak. On the Kospi, though, both retail and foreign investors were net buyers, and with its IPO shares, of course, of the internet-only lender Kakaobank were up around 30% from the opening price. Tell us about the domestic market.
Right. If you look at the domestic market, the liquidity is quite ample. With this Kakao listing, quite a bit of money came in to play this market. And the customer deposit is hitting as high as about 70 trillion won, which is one of the record level that we have been seeing in the past. So clearly, the domestic money are flowing into the equity market. In terms of the fundamentals, if you look at the overall economy, we are seeing the manufacturing PMI reasonably okay, expanding. And in terms of the export numbers, it's showing quite a good number. All in all, domestic consumption seems to be reasonably okay, even though the high level of the consumer credit as percentage of GDP. In terms of the valuation, furthermore, Furthermore, we are seeing very cheap multiples, and therefore we think that there's some more room for further rise. I think that the most important factor for Korean market to further improve in the future would be the level of payout ratio of the Korean corporation. If the payout ratio hits as high as 50%, which is the average of the global corporations, then the dividend yield will rise to 4% plus. If that's the case, then Korean market will be in a very good position to further rise. We will have to wait and see how the Korean company plays out in terms of the payout ratio regarding dividend.
Indeed. And finally, if we could talk a bit about trade for a minute. In July, Korea posted another current account surplus. So that's 14 months in a row now, and that it's been in the black. And the surplus was much bigger than the same month last year. The surplus grew pretty much for every region. What's the latest on the trade front?
Yes, South Korea's current account surplus widened to US dollar 8.85 billion in June of 2021 from 7.16 billion in the same month 1 year earlier. The goods account surplus expanded to 7.62 billion from 6.18 billion a year ago, while the service deficit narrowed to 0.95 billion from the 1.35 billion a year ago. Clearly, there is a definite income surplus rising. The fundamentals of Korea's current account is improving. This kind of trend is happening because of the competitiveness of the Korean corporations are improving in a global scale. As we know, the semiconductor, the batteries, the electric cars to the traditional manufacturing industries, Korea are doing all well in terms of export, and the foreign investors' net selling has been quite significant in the past, but direct investment is actually improving as well. So overall, current account surplus widens. If that's the case, we think that the Korean market is in good position to further rise in the near future.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us as always, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
The South Korean health authorities have decided to extend the current level of social distancing for another 2 weeks, but with a few adjustments to the size of gatherings that are permitted. Those restrictions will now apply also to people who are fully vaccinated. Korea had more than 1,700 new cases of the virus today. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea will extend its current social distancing measures for another 2 weeks. After much consideration, the government has decided to maintain the highest level 4 in the Greater Seoul area and level 3 for outside the capital area until August 22nd. This means a ban on social gatherings of more than 2 people after 6 p.m. will remain in the capital area. Outside the capital region, gatherings of up to 4 people will still be allowed. With the ongoing spread of the highly transmissible Delta variant, the government has also made several adjustments to the current distancing restrictions. From next Monday, immediate family members will be included in the headcount in social gatherings under level 3, meaning they won't be able to meet in groups of more than 4 people. And under level 4, restrictions on the size of gatherings will now be applied to those who have been fully vaccinated. But also under level 4, churches with more than 101 worshippers will now be allowed to hold in-person religious activities with up to 10% of the total capacity, up to a maximum of 99 people. The Prime Minister also expressed concerns over a possible surge in cases in the days to come.
The spread of the virus could be accelerated with the National Liberation Day holiday coming up next week. Also, it is very important to provide safe environment for our children to study at school for the upcoming second semester.
This comes as the country on Friday reported 1,704 new cases of COVID-19, marking a full month of more than 1,000 cases a day. All but 64 were locally transmitted, with the capital region still accounting for the majority of the cases. However, regions outside the capital have been reporting more than 600 cases for 3 days straight, and on Friday accounted for more than 38% of local transmissions. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
A nursing assistant in her 40s who was paralyzed after getting a coronavirus vaccine has been recognized by a South Korean state agency as the victim of an industrial accident, entitling her to compensation in the first case of its kind. The Korea Workers' Compensation and Welfare Service issued the decision on Friday. The woman suffered from double vision and paralysis after getting the AstraZeneca vaccine in March. She's entitled to compensation because she had to get the vaccine during work hours. However, the health authorities say that there is no proven causal link between her side effects and the vaccine. Seoul's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong spoke on the phone today with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and discussed cooperation on North Korea. They reaffirmed that the allies will continue to coordinate closely to achieve substantive progress on North Korea's complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the peninsula. They also discussed continuing efforts to engage with the North, including humanitarian cooperation. This evening, the two Koreas and the U.S. are taking part in the ASEAN Regional Forum, where they'll discuss regional security issues. This year, North Korea's ambassador to Indonesia is expected to join on behalf of the regime's foreign minister. According to a report in Congress, the Biden administration might consider offering sanctions relief to North Korea in exchange for partial steps toward denuclearization. But that, it said, would be difficult to do without support from Congress. In its status report on diplomacy with the North, the U.S. Congressional Research Service says that appears to be the direction the administration is going. But congressional support would likely be needed because the sanctions not only target the North's weapons development, but also relate to human rights, money laundering, terrorism, and so on. If talks do restart, it said, Congress will look for ways to keep the sanctions from blocking humanitarian aid. However, it added that the ball is in North Korea's court since it's been unresponsive to attempts to engage. This morning, South Korean President Moon Jae-in paid a visit to the main fire station in the city of Yongin, just south of Seoul, to show support for the firefighters who've been working hard to respond to emergencies due to the heat wave and COVID-19. He thanked them for playing an important role in protecting people from the heat wave by rapidly getting people to hospitals, cooling down extremely hot places like farms and migrant housing, and providing water for household use where needed. President Moon also pointed out that they have enabled people to get the treatment they need quickly by helping transport COVID-19 patients and people with vaccine side effects. He also promised to improve their working conditions. Now the latest from the Olympics. With just 3 days remaining in Tokyo, events are winding down, but still more to come. Fans now turning their attention to women's volleyball, where Korea tonight will face the world #2 team, Brazil, in the semifinal at 9 p.m. South Korea is ranked 11th in the world, so this could be a tough one. But Team Korea have overcome the odds before at this Olympics, including a win over Turkey in the previous stage. Plus, one of Brazil's best players, Tandara Caseta, who was on the 2012 gold medal team, has reportedly been sent back home after a doping test came out positive. If they can get past Brazil, Korea will face either the U.S. or Serbia this Sunday for a chance at their first volleyball medal in 45 years. Hopes are high for team captain Kim Yeon-kyung because this will be her last Olympics. But before that, there's the final in women's sport climbing, which starts in just a few minutes at 5:30 p.m. There are 8 climbers in the final, including South Korea's Seo Chae-hyun, who qualified for the final in 2nd place. This sport is new to the Olympics this year, so a medal of whichever kind will make history. There are 3 parts to the final, starting with speed climbing, then bouldering, and ending with lead climbing, which is Seo Chae-hyun's strength, and in fact, she's ranked #1 in that part. In just a few hours, South Korea's Park Hee-jun will be competing for a bronze medal in karate, which is another new sport at the Olympics this year. That's scheduled at 7:40. In the kata event, he'll be taking on the 2021 European champion Ali Sofoglu of Turkey. The Korean men's table tennis team, meanwhile, lost this afternoon to rivals Japan 3-1 in their bronze medal match. The last time Koreans took home a medal in table tennis was in 2012 when the men's team won silver in London. And one sport that Korea has dominated from the 1988 Games in Seoul to Tokyo 2020 is archery. To find out how they've done it, our Chae-hyun went to a training center for archers and heard directly from a gold medalist.
Arrow after arrow hits the target at one of South Korea's archery training centers. The country's archery team has won gold medals for 9 Olympics in a row. The coach Lee Sung-jin, two-time Olympic archery gold medalist, says a fair selection competition is what has made such an impressive winning streak possible.
Looking at 120 athletes in the selection, there's a fine line between 100 of them. If the competition begins in September, the athletes have to keep their best condition until May or June. They need to try their best to be selected for the national team first.
Regardless of their experience, any athletes over 17 who can stay at their peak condition could become a member of national Olympic team. The selected archers need to hit a 122-centimeter target from 70 meters away. That's roughly 7 times the length of a standard city bus. For the athletes to stay calm even when pressure, psychological training is vital to help them prepare for any situation. For some athletes, having their own mental or physical routine helps them focus.
In addition to getting professional advice from our coach, I always keep trying image training whenever I'm competing or practicing. I try to remember the image of having a good posture when I'm shooting.
The archers practice at baseball stadiums with loud crowds shouting. They practice in windy and humid weather, and they even prepare for earthquakes. The Korea Archery Association built an identical archery stadium in Jincheon National Training Center, so the athletes can use to hearing announcements in Japanese, surrounded by spectators, and even hearing photographers' camera shutters. Technological support from Hyundai Motor Group played a big role in helping the athletes reach peak performance.
We provided a shooting machine that evaluates the arrows, an automatic scoring machine, a vision-based device that measures heart rate, an AI coaching system, and customized bow grips using a 3D printer.
Virtual reality simulation was also introduced to help the athletes' psychological conditioning. This year's Summer Olympics might have only just ended, but training for the next Olympics has already begun, as Team Korea aims for more gold medals at Paris 2024. 최원정, 아리랑 뉴스, 홍성.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.